In the Second World War, key battles were won and lost in the skies, and whether pilots were dogfighting in Spitfires or flying missions in B-17 bombers, the danger of being shot down behind enemy lines was very real. Our next story is about a day when that nearly happened, if it weren't for a man who followed an extraordinary code of honor.
Sometimes it took more than skill or even luck to get you back safely. Sometimes it took something else. This is the story of how one B-17 bomber crew made it home because of the enemy. As a young man, Franz and his brother August learned to fly in gliders they built themselves. As they grew up, the Germany they knew was changing rapidly. Adolf Hitler was capturing the imagination of disenchanted Germans. Franz, however, chose to train pilots, and while his brother became a fighting ace, soon his fate would be sealed.
He was allowed to go home.
The death of his brother, shot down by the enemy, affected Franz Stiegler deeply. The newly minted fighter pilot found himself in Africa under the watchful eye of squadron leader Gustav Rodel. Rodel had a strict code of conduct, especially when it came to the enemy. He told Stiegler, "If I ever catch you shooting at a man in a parachute, a downed fighter, I will shoot you down myself." Mako says Rodel added something else.
Franz, it's not for your enemy that you do this. You do this for yourself, for your soul, so that one day, if God willing you survive this war, you can live with yourself.
A skilled fighter, after Africa, Stiegler served in Sicily and Europe, and while shot down several times, he always survived and was on the verge of achieving the coveted Knight's Cross. Shooting down one more enemy bomber would do it. A young second lieutenant from West Virginia named Charlie Brown was getting ready to fly his first mission. As a rookie, he and his young crew, most barely 20, would occupy the most dangerous spot in the B-17 formation. On December 20th, 1943, almost as soon as they hit German territory, they were in trouble.
It was a terrible first mission. They were hit before they even got to drop their bombs. So they lost one engine, the nose got blown off. They drop their bombs, they fall out of formation. Another engine falls off. Next thing you know, the German fighters swarm this plane. It was 15-1.
B-17 out of control at 3 o'clock.
As luck would have it, Charlie Brown lost control and his plane fell through the sky, losing their fighters but just barely avoiding a crash. But that's when Franz Stiegler got them in his sights.
Every foot of the bomber had a hole. He looks down the tail and there he sees the tail gunner. He sees the gunner is slumped over them. His head is practically missing. And the blood is actually streaming down the barrels of the guns.
In that moment, depicted here by artist John D. Shaw, Franz Stiegler, seeing the big bomber is crippled, commits an act some would call treason, punishable by death. After looking his enemies in the eyes, he decides to save them.
And he says, this bomber with these 9 or 10 men aboard is the same thing as a man in a parachute. And he remembered that lesson from the desert. When he saw the wounded men on that bomber, he saw their eyes, suddenly he saw his brother's eyes. He saw his brother's face. He saw his brother's last moment. And he realized that he was about to kill men just like someone had killed his brother in a way.
And he couldn't do it.
And he couldn't do it.
Instead, Stiegler escorts them right across German lines, staying just off the big bomber's wing so anti-aircraft guns wouldn't fire, then leaving them with a salute to limp back to England. Upon landing, Charlie Brown tells his incredible story, but not for long.
And the intelligence officer said, wow, this is incredible. I'm going to run this up the flagpole. And sure enough, the same intelligence officer comes back an hour later with a different look on his face. He's not happy. He says, Charlie, you can't tell anyone what happened. The brass is putting a lid on this thing.
No medals, no recognition.
Exactly. They didn't want word of this to get out.
Brown would survive 26 more missions, finally getting to celebrate the end without ever speaking another word about the German fighter pilot who saved his crew. Franz, too, would survive the war, only to emigrate to Canada looking for work. But he never forgot that American bomber crew.
I saw this B-17 about a mile and a half away coming out fairly low. And I said, Christ, what's going on now? It looked like he was, to me, it looked like he was landed and unloaded some casualties or whatever. Anyway, I told him he kind of stopped my motor, and they went after this B-17. And he came up from the rear. He was then about, as I came up to him, he was almost about 2,000 feet high again. And I saw the tail gunner wasn't there because the guns were hanging down. Half the tail was missing on the left-hand side, practically no tail at all. So, and the rudder was in the same shape. So I went up to the right side, along the fuselage. It's hard to describe. If you see an airplane like so crippled, you know positively that there were badly wounded people on board. And for me, it would have been the same as shooting at a parachute. I just couldn't shoot. That's all there is to it. And I just hoped that he brought his wounded man home. I went up to the right wing, right to close by. And I saw one pilot sitting in there. And after that, another one came, the co-pilot. And they looked at me, and the pilot was nicking.
I look out the right window, and there parked on my right wing is a German Bf-109. Just as the little sucker looked like he owned me and belonged there. And I was still in a little bit of a state of shock. And so I sort of closed my eyes and shook my head as you would with a nightmare. And if I close my eyes and open them again, he'll be gone. Well, I opened them again, and he was still there.
I waved to him, and we came out over the water, and I figured, well, the shortest way we can get away was to fly to Sweden. Well, it was only half an hour flight for him. But no, I said, stupid guy, he made a left-hand turn towards England. I said, well, now I hope you make it.
The pilot gave a salute and left. So we started trying to make a decision. I said anyone who wanted to bail out could bail out. I was going to try to make it back to England. And so the crew all chose to stay on board, and we just barely made it in England at about 250 feet. A couple of P-47s came along, got us into another air base. We landed, casualties were removed, and then we started a normal interrogation, that sort of thing. It was like meeting a family member, a brother that you haven't seen for 40 years. That's about as close as I can come.
Franz, what were your feelings when you met again for the first time?
I was so happy as we met that I grabbed him and hugged him. Wasn't easy.
The fact that he risked his life, really, in many ways, and I wrote him in a letter, I said, if you made a habit of feeling sorry for bomber crews and flag up alongside them, I am sure that you were shot down many times. But it was not only the, if you will, I use the term audacity, that he came up to us, and then recognizing the threat. If someone had seen him and reported him, it could have been a death sentence, a double. So he had the double impact of the fact that we might do something stupid, or his own government, as a consequence, might do something not necessarily stupid, but in terms of punishment.
For 400 combat missions.
He flew nearly 500 missions, actually, but his most honorable, the time he let the Yankee get away.
This one here, I got because I didn't shoot Charlie down.
A post-war peace medal awarded by England because he didn't shoot Charlie down.
That's the only one I'm allowed to wear.
Private note that Franz Stiegler had written to Charlie Brown. In part it reads, in 1940, I lost my only brother. Just before Christmas, I had the chance to save a B-17 from her destruction. The pilot Charlie Brown is for me as precious as my brother was. Thanks, Charlie. The two became best friends, traveling the country, speaking at different functions. Charlie Brown's nightmares of that fateful day stopped, and he eventually was awarded his country's second highest honor for his actions that day in 1943. Franz and Charlie both died in 2008, just 8 months apart. Franz Stiegler never got his Knight's Cross, but as he often said, he got something much better.